In our headlines at this hour, South Korea's homegrown Nuri rocket has succeeded in placing satellites into orbit for the first time, making the country 7th in the world, capable of carrying payloads weighing over a ton. And 2 suspected cases of monkeypox have been reported here in the country, including a foreign national who arrived on Monday and a South Korean citizen who flew in from Germany on Tuesday. Meanwhile, Seoul is playing host to the 2022 World Emerging Security Forum, aimed at addressing a host of new challenges, including those against health and cyber safety. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of the Daily Report. It's Wednesday afternoon, June 22nd, here in capital Seoul. South Korea has marked a major milestone in its space ambitions as its first domestically developed launch vehicle, Nuri, soared into the skies back on Tuesday to place its satellites into orbit for the first time. And earlier on this Wednesday morning, success was confirmed following a two-way communication between the verification satellite in space and the ground station over in Daejeon. Arirang's Han Sung-woo has more on this landmark launch.
Mission accomplished. South Korea has become the 7th country in the world to be independently capable of sending a satellite weighing over a ton into orbit using domestic technology. At 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the nation's first homegrown space rocket, Nuri, soared into the skies for the second time and didn't disappoint. The 3-stage space rocket, after reaching its target altitude of 700 kilometers, placed both its performance verification satellite, holding 4 functioning mini-cube satellites, and its 1.3-ton dummy satellite into orbit, 70 seconds apart at around 4:15 p.m. As confirmed by the Ministry of Science and ICT and the Korea Aerospace Research Institute's joint presser at the Naro Space Center about an hour after the launch.
Nuri reached its target altitude and successfully placed the performance satellite into orbit.
Like Minister Lee Jong-ho just said, we have successfully carried out Nuri's second launch.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol wasn't present on site for the event, but watched it from his office in Yongsan-gu District and later exclaimed that the way to space had opened, calling the launch a product of 30 years of effort, and also promised the country's aerospace officials boosted support.
정부도 제가 공약에서 말씀드린 바와 같이 항공우주청을 설치해서 이 항공우주 산업을 체계적으로 지원하겠습니다. 고맙습니다. 정말 수고 많으셨습니다.
During U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to Seoul last month, President Yoon vowed to strengthen bilateral cooperation on space development, particularly the Artemis program, a U.S.-led international space exploration endeavor that aims to make manned lunar exploration possible by 2025, construct a manned lunar base by 2028, and in the long term, even prepare for missions to Mars. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News, Gohung.
And now that Nuri has noted its first success in space, engineers say 4 more similar missions will be made within the next 5 years to enhance related technology. Our Payunji explains.
Through the successful launch of South Korea's domestically developed rocket Nuri, South Korea took a major step in its space program and boosted the country's growing space ambitions. Now the country will no longer have to rely on launchers from other countries to put its satellites into orbit. It may also possibly be able to export this technology to other countries in the future.
Now we can help other countries develop satellites and put them into orbit using our launcher. So it's a meaningful step because we are now able to send our satellite into space with our launcher whenever we want.
But Tuesday's launch is just the beginning. South Korea plans to send Nuri into space for 4 more times over the next 5 years.
Our government plans to stage 4 additional launches by 2027 and improve technical reliability and stability.
The next launch is slated for 2023, when the country will be sending a small satellite that weighs 100 kilograms into space. Then it'll send several small satellites into space from 2024 to 2027. Also, in August this year, South Korea plans to mobilize its lunar orbiter, Nuri, for the first time. After more than 6 years spent perfecting its design and trajectory, it'll lift off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. It will orbit the moon for about a year, and if successful, it'll be the first South Korean mission to travel beyond Earth's orbit. The country's ultimate goal is to send a lunar landing module to the moon by 2031. 배은지, Arirang News.
In other news, suspected cases of monkeypox have been reported here in the local front. 2 unrelated individuals who arrived from overseas on different dates earlier this week are currently being treated for symptoms related, that is, to this viral disease. Our Arirang reports.
The first 2 suspected cases of monkeypox were reported in South Korea on Wednesday. Without giving out specific details, the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency said one of the 2 people is a foreign national who entered the country on Monday and reportedly began showing symptoms on Sunday. The symptoms reportedly included a sore throat and skin lesions, and the traveler visited a hospital in Busan, 450 kilometers southeast of Seoul, on Tuesday. The individual is being treated in isolation at the same medical center. Meanwhile, the other suspected case, a Korean citizen, displayed symptoms such as fever, sore throat, and fatigue upon entering the country from Germany on Tuesday afternoon at around 4 p.m. This person reportedly suffered a headache 3 days before arrival and is currently being treated at Incheon Medical Center west of Seoul. According to a KDCA statement on the same day, diagnostics and an epidemiological investigation for monkeypox are being conducted. It also added that the health authorities will hold a briefing to announce any related measures once results are released. President Yoon also ordered health authorities to reinforce quarantine measures for overseas visitors and strengthen the monitoring system while securing a swift supply of vaccines and antiviral drugs. Earlier in June, South Korea designated monkeypox as a second-level infectious disease on its 4-tier system. The category currently includes COVID-19, tuberculosis, and chickenpox. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
Right, and staying with that news, authorities earlier on this Wednesday morning confirmed that the South Korean national who flew in from Germany on Tuesday has tested positive for monkeypox. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol is urging for structural reform of public institutions and for efforts to tackle their growing debt as his administration places priority on people's livelihoods. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
모든 정책의 목표가 첫째도 민생, 둘째도 민생, 셋째도 민생이라는 점을 잊지 마시기 바랍니다.
This is how President Yoon Suk-yeol emphasized the need to address economic difficulties during Tuesday's weekly cabinet meeting, urging all public servants to work with a sense of crisis. And this week's meeting focused on reforming public institutions where the president said there's a need for intensive adjustments to spending.
공공기관 혁신은 더 이상 미룰 수 없는 과제입니다. 부채가 급증하고 있음에도 불구하고 지난 5년간 공공기관의 조직과 인력은 크게 늘었습니다. 공공기관 평가를 엄격히 하고 방만하게 운영되어 온 부분은 과감하게 개선해야 합니다.
Yoon added that debts owed by public institutions have shot up during the past 5 years to 583 trillion won, which is about $450 billion. Noting as an example the sharp interest rate hikes by the U.S. Federal Reserve, the president said countries around the world are doing all they can to tackle economic challenges and once again stressed the need for a private-led economy and the cutting of red tape.
우리 경제의 성장 발목을 잡고 있는 이권 카르텔, 부당한 지대 추구의 폐습을 단호하게 없애는 것이 바로 규제 혁신이고 우리 경제를 키우는 것입니다.
On Tuesday, the cabinet agreed to lower quota tariffs to 0% on 13 import items where supplies and prices have been unstable, including cooking oil, flour, and pork, and to extend the current tax incentives for car buyers. Bracing for what lies ahead, the top office has already activated an emergency economy response system while it'll look into streamlining public institutions so that more money can be saved and used for people in need. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And on the economic front, market insiders say prices of semiconductors may tumble in the months ahead. Our Kim Yan-sung has more on their calculations and causes.
semiconductor prices could slip later this year. Market research company TrendForce has forecast that some of the semiconductors that are used in the production of smartphones and PCs may see prices fall up to 8% year-on-year in the third quarter. NAND flash, a data storing semiconductor, is to fall by up to 5%. And DRAM, used for short-term memory storage, could fall up to 8% later this year. Analysts at TrendForce said that the slump in prices comes from dampened demand. The continued war in Ukraine and soaring prices have cut consumers' appetites for new smartphones, PCs, and other electronic goods. According to industry analysis from Counterpoint, global smartphone shipments are expected to fall by 3% this year compared to last year. But the predicted slump in semiconductor prices may be a sign of a bigger economic trend.
I said a recession will start from next year, but it seems like it's starting a little faster than expected. Recession signs are already showing up in the semiconductor prices.
The expert said that with slowing growth, dampened consumption will follow, which in turn will cut production and ultimately lead to a lukewarm demand for semiconductors. So the recession and a lower price for semiconductors may come hand in hand. And South Korean chip giants Samsung and SK hynix could face a direct blow from the slump in the global chip market. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Right, and in part 2 of our program, we have details on the latest advances in the semiconductor industry with a panel of experts. See you in a few minutes. Welcome back. Chip manufacturing capability is emerging as a prerequisite for a nation's economic advances and even security interests amid the global shortage of semiconductors in recent years. Now, that being said, we address efforts by Samsung to advance its chip technology. For more, I have Professor Song Soo-young from Chungang University. Professor Song, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
I also have Professor Lee Chun-hee at Ulsan National University of Science and Technology, who is currently over in Texas live on the line. Professor Lee, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Right, Professor.
I'm happy to join you.
And we're happy you're with us. Professor Song, let's start here in the studio, that is. Let's begin with a few words on the history of South Korea's semiconductor industry and its rapid development.
Yeah. When I searched for some history of the semiconductor in the industry in Korea, has been dated back to 1965 even. At that time, just the assembly line was introduced in the Korean industry under the auspice of the subsidiary of Fairchild and Motorola. In 1974, for the first time, the wafer processing facilities are developed and established in Korea. And then that is, for the first time, value added and the high technology is required. And then since then, the Korean semiconductor was established and merged with by the Samsung Electronics. That is the start of some kind of wafer processing industry in Korea. Since then, we have witnessed the great development of semiconductor industry. And for the first time, at first, it was Samsung, Hyundai, LG, who has comprised the major treble companies in Korean economy. Right now, currently, it has been changed, and the Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, SK Group, and another one is DB High-Tech. Those are three prominent semiconductor companies right now.
Right, and among those prominent companies, Professor Lee, next week Samsung will announce plans to mass produce 3-nanometer chips. And I understand that these chips will be the industry's most advanced semiconductors. And that being said, what can you tell us about these 3-nanometer chips and their implications, Professor Lee?
Yes, when you say 3-nanometer or 5-nanometer, whatever with the numbers, it represents roughly means the size of semiconductor or the distance between the semiconductor. So when you say 5-nanometer, 3-nanometer, then the size of semiconductor chip and the distance between them get smaller and smaller. So when you say 3-nanometer semiconductor, then compared to 5 nanometers, the distance gets smaller, so they can easily communicate each other between the chips. So the communication speed will be faster, like more than 30%. And within the same wafer, you can implant like more chips. Right? So you will have denser chips on the wafer. So conventionally, you remember that President Joe Biden and President Yoon, they signed their signature on the wafer, semiconductor wafer, right? And in one paper, 5-nanometer semiconductor wafer, it has around 1 trillion numbers of transistors there. But for 3 nanometers, it may have like 1.5 trillion transistors are there. So you will have, you can like store more memory. For example, in your smartphone, if you use 3-nanometer chips, then you can have 50% higher high memories. And also, since the distance between the chips gets shorter, and you don't have to use much power, so power consumption will be like you can have like less power consumption, like more than 50%. So like if you use smartphone, then smartphone adapting 3-nanometer chips, then your smartphone will last like 50% more time than before. So in every way, you will have much better performance in every gadget and like in many other electronic devices.
I see. Professor, that's actually quite remarkable right there then. Professor Song, Samsung Electronics Lee Jae-yong embarked on a business trip to Europe earlier this month, and this was his second overseas agenda following his trip to the UAE and Saudi Arabia last December. What is your assessment of such active engagements by Mr. Lee on the international scene?
To me, as I would like to make some conjecture, but based upon the reason why Vice President Lee has paid a visit to Europe, particularly he's concerned about the ASML companies, which is the label is Advanced Semiconductor Materials Lithography. So this Dutch company has monopolized the production of the lithography, photolithography to imprint the circuit design over the wafer to produce the chips. So as Professor Lee mentioned that the efficiency and then the size of the distance has been reduced, it means from economic perspective, it is a scale of economy, and also production capacity has been greatly improved. For example, given the size of a wafer, when the distance is reduced by half, it means we can produce double the size of the production, and the consumption of the electricity will be reduced. So that could improve the efficiency very much. But however, then we need some photolithography to produce those chips. So then that is only possible by the machine, which was manufactured by this ASML. That is a photolithography, and then this company used extremely ultraviolet ray to print those very narrow line on the wafer to produce the chip. That is the key point. I think that is a key issue why Vice President Lee has paid a visit to Europe. And on the other hand, he also paid a visit to countries, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So to me, it sounds like he is financing or to have some investment opportunities. So in terms of financing, because it needs to purchase the production, and then huge investment is necessary. Particularly, the Samsung Electronics has announced building a new company in the U.S., right? So it requires some investment. Right now, the stock price of Samsung Electronics has been plunged so much by the half side. So that's why I think he maybe looks for some financing source from two countries. I think the electronic market, device market, is not much big in the Middle Eastern countries. So that's my guess.
Right, I see. And Professor Lee, what can you tell us about the yield prospects with regard to Samsung's 3-nanometer process?
Oh yeah, yield is maybe one of the most essential part of the semiconductor. So yield, simply speaking, yield means success rate of the semiconductor chips. Suppose you have like a wafer, and like if yield is 30%, and maybe like 30 out of 100 chips are like working successfully. So previously, as far as I know, the 3-nanometer semiconductor chips wafer, like previously the success rate yield was around like 20 or 30%, but that's not really proper for commercialization. But recently, as far as I know, Samsung really substantially increased the yield, the success rate of the chip, so that I think they are very confident enough to show it, to showcase to public and release the chips for commercialization.
Right, I see. Well, they have announced that they're going to mass produce these chips, so we are assuming that the yield prospects have been raised then, Professor Lee, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right, I see.
Substantially, I guess. Yes.
Right, most likely then. Professor Song, some pundits claim that semiconductors equal security in modern society. How do you respond to this statement?
Yeah, to me, it sounds like it has become conventional wisdom that United States, the semiconductor manufacturing is clearly very related with some security issue, national security issue. But I think that is mistaken because the semiconductor itself cannot perform anything. When it is implanted into some devices or some armaments, and then we could make use of semiconductor and let the device perform several diverse activities which are desirable. So to that regard, the semiconductor itself, out of the global GDP, it only has been take just 0.5% of the global GDP. So in terms of value, even though semiconductor industry is just concentrated in the very advanced countries and economies, but from in the worldwide, then it has contributed just a very small percentage of the contribution of the GDP and the welfare of the people. So I think this issue is quite related with some national defense to the United States. To them, it may be right, but still there are some prominent economists to deny that, and then just the protectionism or the reshoring and the friend-shoring, such as the movement and the fragmentation of the geopolitical issues around the world is really bad for the U.S. because U.S. has suffered so much from the inflation, which was recorded at 8.8% in May, and some economists has demonstrate that once the trade liberalization has been recovered, then easily they can reduce 2% of inflation rate because of the facilitation of the trade, and the cheaper products could be delivered, and some supply disruption could be relieved and eased. So to that regard, I think this is particularly important for our economy, that we should not take it position of this is quite related with a defense or security issue. Rather, we should focus on maintaining some market where we can sell those some devices in addition to semiconductors. Just focusing on semiconductor is a very narrow perspective.
Right, we need to broaden our perspective then.
Yeah.
And Professor, how does Samsung's 3-nanometer process, that is, differ from that of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which I believe is involved in a similar venture?
It's kind of different. For example, like TSMC 3-nanometer, they said they're gonna release 3-nanometer chips in the second half of this year, probably from the fall of this year. Samsung already released 3-nanometer chips, and basically TSMC is like adapting a previous technology. Like simply speaking, since like this is like you can see this is a semiconductor channel, and to control electricity flow, you need a gate. Control the electricity flow, whether you can shut the gate or open the gate so that you can control the flow on and off. And TSMC is using the previous technology. We call it FinFET. Like it's like controlling from the top and from like 3 ways. And strikingly, Samsung is adapting the most advanced technology. We call it gate all around, GAA. So you control the flow of the electricity by from the older side, that you can have much better control. You can have much like easier and better control of the electric flow. But I don't know, like it's a little bit risky now. But Samsung is anyway taking and pursuing the most advanced technology, gate all around, GAA. I guess there seems to be some secret of Samsung showing off the 3 nanometer chips, even with the most recent technology compared to TSMC. So if it's really successful now, then Samsung really have a good chance to chase after TSMC in the semiconductor market.
I see. Well, that is a very optimistic outlook then. Professor, so what are your words of advice to the Yoon administration as it seeks to foster that is high-tech industries to boost their presence perhaps in the global market?
I would like to say that in Korea, actually the semiconductor industry is not for the domestic economy, but for they rely huge on export. And currently, we have Samsung and SK Hynix. Those companies are called integrated device manufacturers, so which means they not only design the design of the circuit, but also produce some semiconductors, DRAMs, or other types of NAND. On the other hand, DB High-Tech is only foundry. So TSMC, as Professor Lee mentioned, in Taiwan, actually, they are mostly their job is a foundry, which means just that they receive the design and then they produce according to the order from the owner of design. So worldwide, globally speaking, what is we call the semiconductor company only produces the design of the chips and sell them and make an order around the world globally and combine together and sell them, those semiconductors, to other industries and other electronic devices manufacturer. So those are NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Apple, but actually Apple is dropped from the top 5 right now. So those companies are all, they focus on design of the circuit. That is a very high value and very promising. But what I'm most concerned is the upcoming recession of the economy because of the geopolitical issue. Still, when we lose the semiconductor market and then the decline of the demand will be huge, that could impact the Samsung and SK Hynix as well as all other countries. So that's why we have witnessed, as just a moment ago, the news reporter has mentioned that DRAM's price has been plunged so much. The reason why it has shown such a very big volatile fluctuation is very sensitive to the economic situation.
Right.
So from economist's perspective, is it better to depend on such a very volatile? So I would like to pay attention to also stabilization and the stable economic performance is also very necessary in the current situation.
Especially given the geopolitical risks.
Right.
All right, Professor Song, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts and your time. And Professor, over in the US, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I appreciate you.
Seoul is playing host to an international security forum aimed at addressing a host of emerging global challenges, including those targeting cyber safety and stability. Our Kim Dami reports.
From the COVID-19 pandemic and its evolving variants to prominent cyber attacks amid the crisis in Ukraine, these hurdles could be just a taste of the emerging security threats that the world is facing. South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin said this at the 2022 World Emerging Security Forum on Tuesday, pinpointing the importance of robust international cooperation based on multi-stakeholder partnerships against global risks.
It is in this context that the Korean government launched this forum. As a multi-stakeholder platform, it aims to raise international awareness on the emerging security threats and in turn facilitate effective partnerships to address these common challenges together.
Just like the theme of this year's forum, past, present, and future of emerging security threats, Experts and scholars from around the world put their heads together in Seoul and laid out common global threats, including the cyber attacks detected in the Ukraine both before and following Russia's invasion of the country. In fact, one expert warned that such attacks are evidence of a different kind of warfare.
So I think that should make us look back on some of the prognostications that have been advanced over the years with some skepticism about how cyber warfare can provide a real advantage to the offense because it opens up opportunities for new attacks at a minimal cost because the attacker doesn't have to take the risk of sending in armed men.
But experts also pointed out the world already has the resources and technology and capacity to respond effectively to such security threats, namely partnerships between government and the private sector.
To do this. Now, we've seen the private sector be incredibly effective even in the Ukraine in terms of things that, for instance, Google has done about taking down some of its mapping services, things that Microsoft and other parties have done to work with the Ukrainians to help them with cybersecurity. So that actionable connection.
The cyber expert added governments and private bodies need to shield up and build on important milestones, citing examples of different partners coming together, such as the development of COVID-19 vaccines in record time. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
The U.S., meanwhile, is resuming its restrictions on the use of landmines in conflict zones, reversing a Trump-era policy. The Korean Peninsula remains an exception, though. Our Kim Hyo-sun has more.
Washington had decided to ban the use of anti-personnel landmines in its military in conflicts around the world, with the exception of the Korean Peninsula. The White House said in a statement Tuesday that the U.S. is joining the vast majority of countries around the world in limiting the use of the devices that are buried underground or scattered on the surface. It further explained that they have a, quote, disproportionate impact on civilians long after combat has ended. The move follows years of criticism by human rights groups that claim the U.S. has refused to adopt an international treaty banning the use of such deadly explosives. The move is a reversal of Trump-era policy from 2020, which allowed the country's military commanders to use landmines in combat. Currently, the U.S. has a stockpile of 3 million anti-personnel landmines. Under the country's new policy, any that aren't needed to protect South Korea will be destroyed. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
South Korea's southern port city of Busan is hoping to host the 2030 World Expo, and Prime Minister Han Duk-soo pitched the city's proposal in a presentation to the governing body over in Paris. Here's Choi Min-jung.
South Korea has ambitiously pitched its bid to host the World Expo 2030 in the port city of Busan. The country's Prime Minister Han Duk-soo delivered the presentation on Tuesday at the Bureau International d'Exposition in France. The agency with 170 member states is in charge of overseeing and regulating World Expos. South Korea's proposed theme for World Expo 2030 Busan is Transforming Our World, Navigating Toward a Better Future. The Prime Minister stressed the importance of building a future in which humans, technology, and nature can prosper in harmony. And he said that South Korea would like to play a bridging role between developing and developed nations. In promoting the country as a potential host, Han highlighted the nation's ability to bounce back from economic hardships.
Korea has overcome war, poverty, economic crisis, and other difficult challenges to emerge as the world's 10th largest economy. We want to serve with the international community by sharing these valuable lessons in the hope that we can help illuminate the way forward for all.
Han also underlined that South Korea has become an active player in the global community through cutting-edge industries and trendy cultural output. South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol wrapped up the presentation with a video message.
The 2030 Busan World Expo will be a festival where everyone around the world can celebrate, enjoy, and experience the future. See you all in Busan, Korea.
South Korea is competing against Italy and Saudi Arabia, and the winning country will be announced in November 2023. The South Korean government says the expo would bring significant economic benefits to the country worth around $47 billion. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
On the entertainment front, 2 songs from BTS's anthology album Proof have made their way into the Billboard Hot 100 chart. Our Song Yoo-jin has more on this latest entry and the others before it.
K-pop sensations BTS once again hit the mainstream Billboard Hot 100 chart this week. The title song Yet to Come and another song Run to BTS from their latest album Proof were ranked 13th and 73rd respectively. It's the latest of many appearances in the charts. In 2017, 4 years after their debut, the group started having a presence on the Hot 100, which ranks the most popular songs each week. Their first song on the chart was DNA, which ranked 85th in September of that year. With the lyrics mostly in Korean, this was the second song in Korean after Psy's Gangnam Style to enter the chart. A year later, Fake Love made it into the top 10, and in 2020, Dynamite wrote history by making BTS the first South Korean artists to top the chart. So far, a total of 25 songs by BTS have charted on the Hot 100, with 6 ranking number 1. Hit song Butter especially stands out as it spent 10 weeks on the top. The group's albums have also shown a stellar performance. In 2015, the album The Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 2 first made it to the Billboard 200, the main albums chart. 3 years later, Love Yourself Tear became the first K-pop album to snatch number 1. From that album up to Proof, which was released early this month, BTS have landed 6 number 1 albums on the chart. And of course, the K-pop stars have seen success in other countries as well. Proof became their 10th album to top Japan's Oricon Weekly Albums chart, selling more than 510,000 copies last week. It has also swept the top spots of official album charts in Germany, Belgium, Australia, and the Netherlands. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Back on Tuesday, June 21st, the world marked Yoga Day, and a related event was held here in capital Seoul as well. My colleague Yoon was there.
Namaste. June 21st is a meaningful day for yoga lovers around the world. It's International Yoga Day. Back in 2014, India's Prime Minister proposed to the UN General Assembly that yoga should be celebrated every year. Acknowledging its main mission to spread peace, 177 nations supported this proposition. This year, Korea celebrated the 8th International Day of Yoga at Seoul's Hodemun Independence Park. The Indian Embassy in Korea chose this iconic cultural site because it's also where Korea and India jointly inaugurated a peace park to celebrate the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi.
I'm here at the International Day of Yoga event. It's the first time in 2 years since an in-person event like this has been held due to the pandemic. Now, as you can see around me, there's many yoga enthusiasts varying of age and different skills coming together to find inner peace.
Though each participant had different reasons why they started yoga, it was their love for the discipline that brought them all here.
Decided to try out yoga because it had a low entry barrier. You could do it anywhere as long as you have a yoga mat. I'm so happy that I came to this event to meet fellow yogis and just relax.
I fell in love with yoga when I was job hunting. Back then I had horrible back pain and yoga made me feel better. I never missed an opportunity to do it. Even today I took a day off work just to come here.
The Indian ambassador to South Korea said yoga has definitely brought the two countries closer.
It's a very accessible discipline, and it's a discipline that really brings together the mind, body, and soul. And I think through this means we are really able to identify and build on this age-old friendship between India and Korea.
This was a popular opinion among other yogis.
Even though yoga originated from India, it is definitely something anyone can try out and relate to. It brings the world together.
The Indian Embassy in South Korea plans to host more yoga-related events in Busan on June 27th, along with the rest of the world, as celebrations usually run for days. 신예은, Arirang News.
Come Saturday, that is June 25th, Korea marks 72 years since the start of the Korean War. Now, time appears to have pushed this chapter of the country's painful history out of the public spotlight, but some, as my colleague Ishu says, are working to ensure that it's remembered so that history is not repeated.
The Forgotten War. That's how the Korean War is often referred to outside of Korea. It's because the war, which took place between 1950 and 1953, is at times overshadowed by the Second World War before it and the Vietnam War after. And the impression of the Korean War is fading even in South Korea. According to a survey taken in 2020 by the 중앙일보 newspaper, only 1 out of 7 South Korean teens knew the year that the Korean War started. Compared to those in older age groups, the figure was significantly lower. Students say this could be because the war feels too distant for them.
It doesn't seem that there's much interest in the topic. From a student's perspective, it seems like something unrelated to us, something only in the books.
Yet there are those who are working hard to make sure the war is not forgotten. Among them is Park Ok-sun, who served during the Korean War as a nursing officer. As the current director of the Korean War Veterans Association's Jongno-gu district branch, she regularly helps educate the next generation about the Korean War.
How difficult was it to restore all the things destroyed during the Korean War? So we shall not start wars, we shall not fight, but instead conduct balanced security education to bring peace to all countries.
Meanwhile, experts say that we should pay attention to how we remember the war.
There are tendencies to remember this war differently based on each country's situation, rather than how it should be remembered, a shared tragedy that should never happen again. Therefore, how we remember the war will play a very important role in our pursuit of peace.
He added that more experience-based education could help. For example, visits to memorial sites would do more than in-class lectures in preserving the memories of war.
As time goes on and the Korean War moves further into the past, we need to keep making efforts to ensure the war is not forgotten but remembered. 이시후, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. There's chaos on Britain's railways as nearly 40,000 workers have left their posts in the UK's biggest rail strike in 30 years. Only 20% of rail services in England, Scotland and Wales were operating on Tuesday. This comes after talks on Monday failed to reach an agreement on a wage increase, with the Transport Union rejecting a 2% increase against their request for 7%. Further strikes on Thursday and Saturday could also lead to major disruptions for millions of workers. Meanwhile, only 60% of trains are expected to run on Wednesday due to a delay in services as some operating staff are not doing overnight shifts. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said that the strike could harm businesses that are still recovering from the impact of COVID-19. Food manufacturing company Kellogg's is set to spin off into 3 independent companies in a move that will separate its iconic brands into distinct snacking, cereal and plant-based businesses. The announcement was made on Tuesday and signals Kellogg's move to focus on snacks as trends show people increasingly eat between meals. This comes as sales figures for cereals reached only $2.4 billion and have stagnated in the US due to a wider range of breakfast options. In contrast, the company's snack sales reached $11 billion. Names for the new companies are set to be announced later, with the process scheduled for completion by the end of 2023. Electric car company Tesla is moving forward with plans to lay off up to 10% of its salaried workers. Tesla CEO Elon Musk provided details of the move at the Qatar Economic Forum on Tuesday, where he said the staff will be laid off over the next 3 months in order to grow the company's hourly workforce. According to Musk, the cuts make up about 3 to 3.5% of the total workforce. He added that in a year from now, the company's workforce will be bigger than today's figures. This year, Tesla has opened up 2 new factories in Germany and Texas. Turning back to the UK, where around 6,000 people, including groups of Druids and pagans, assembled at Stonehenge to celebrate the summer solstice by watching the sun rise. The event on Tuesday morning marks the longest day of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. The 4,500-year-old World Heritage Site has been home to solstice celebrations for millennia, as it was designed to line up with the midsummer sunrise and midwinter sunset. This year was the first in-person event since the COVID-19 pandemic started over 2 years ago. Thousands more watched the event online. The editor of one of Russia's last independent newspapers has auctioned off his 2021 Nobel Peace Prize for a record $103.5 million. Taking place in New York, the Monday auction broke the previous record price paid for a Nobel Prize medal, which was $4.76 million back in 2014. Proceeds from Monday's sale are going to UNICEF to benefit children displaced by the Ukraine war. Dmitry Muratov was awarded the Nobel Prize in October 2021 and was one of the founding members of the Novoya Gazeta newspaper. The paper was forced to stop its activities in Russia in March as the Kremlin clamped down on journalists and public dissent following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good Wednesday afternoon. We're seeing back-to-back scorching days as warm and humid air rolls into the country, while the stationary front is taking a break. Seoul is less hot than yesterday, but still with stifling heat above 30 degrees. Luckily, this will improve tomorrow with nationwide rain in the forecast. And unsettled air will bring showers later today for mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province and southern inland regions. The precipitation may vary from 5 to 40 millimeters, and Jeju will also see some precipitation rain due to a southerly wind from tonight. Well, the main issue for today is the heat alerts. Heat advisories have been expanded to most inland regions, with Daegu reaching 35 degrees and Gyeongju climbing up to 37 degrees. It might feel even hotter with the humidity, so please do everything you can to stay cool in this relentlessly hot weather. And meanwhile, as a stationary front becomes active again tomorrow, but the extreme heat will ease. But the rain will lash down with downpours of up to 80 millimeters, so stay weather aware and be prepared for the rainy season. Now let's take a look at the worldwide weather conditions.
Those are the headlines on this Wednesday afternoon. Stay tuned to Arirang News for more throughout the day. Thank you for now.
엔진 점화, 이류, 유류가 발사되었습니다.